Welcome to our deep dive into the world of Matsuobash.
Matsubash.
You shared this fascinating collection of blog posts,
Yeah.
all in Japanese,
All in Japanese.
about different stops on his famous journey chronicled in Oku no Hosamichi,
Right.
or The Narrow Road to the Interior.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've got to admit, when I first saw these, I thought 17th century Japan, a wandering poet.
Yeah.
This is going to be all tranquil landscapes and flowery language, right?
Not quite.
Yeah.
There's a lot more going on beneath the surface, which is why we're here.
Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty,
Yeah.
you sent over posts about a pretty wide range of locations.
I did.
Just so our listener has a sense of the journey, we're talking about Ogaki, Tsuruga,
Okay.
then a few temples, specifically Tenriji Temple in Matsuoka,
Mm-hmm.
Kumagai Sanzenshuji Temple in Daishuji,
Mm-hmm.
and Nakadera Temple in Komatsu. And then, because everyone needs a little R&R, we'll end up at Yamanaka Onsen.
A good itinerary for a deep dive into both physical and spiritual landscapes, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Let's start by answering the most basic question. Who was Matsuobashi? And why should we, centuries later, still care about his travels?
That's where it gets really interesting. Basho wasn't just some poet scribbling in a notebook. He was a celebrity in his time, a master of haiku, a rock star of the literary world, influencing a whole generation of writers. And Oku no Hosamichi is more than just a travel diary. It's considered a masterpiece because he blends prose and these incredibly evocative haiku to capture the essence of his experience.
To put it in modern terms, imagine if your most epic Instagram travel blog was suddenly considered high art. That's the kind of impact we're talking about.
Exactly. And we can't forget the historical context. This journey took place during the Edo period in Japan, from 1603 to 1868. After centuries of civil war, there was finally peace and stability. So Basho's travels weren't just about pretty scenery. They were happening against a backdrop of a nation rebuilding, rediscovering its identity. It adds a whole other layer, don't you think?
Okay, so it's more than just a finding myself trip. Got it.
Let's get to the first blog post then. It covers Igaki. And one thing that jumped out at me was how it mentions that even today, Igaki is still known for its beauty. It's like Bash's words are echoing through time.
It's remarkable, isn't it? And it speaks to one of Bash's major themes, impermanence. He writes a haiku in Ugaki about a cicada singing into a rock. The cicada's life is so fleeting, and it becomes this symbol for how everything in nature is constantly changing, flowing.
Okay, so there's this deeper meaning woven in. I also noticed a haiku about wondering what one's neighbor is doing in the deep of autumn. It struck me as a bit melancholy. Like even in this beautiful place, there's a sense of loneliness, a yearning for connection.
It's a beautiful observation. And you're right, it's not all sunshine and cherry blossoms. That tension between solitude and connection runs throughout his journey. It's something we'll see play out in different ways as he travels. All right, so moving on to Tsuruga. It seems like a total shift in mood from peaceful Igaki. This is a bustling port city, the kind of place that feels full of energy, maybe even a bit chaotic. Yet the blog post highlights how Basha finds these little pockets of quiet contemplation even there. I'm curious about how he manages to do that.
Tsuruga, unlike the tranquility of Igaki, presented Basha with a very different kind of landscape, one shaped not just by nature, but by history. Remember, this is a region that has seen its share of conflict, and that's where a particular haiku becomes incredibly powerful. The one that's often translated as summer grass is actually referencing the battlefields of the past. Now there's peace, but it's bittersweet. The land remembers.
It's like those places you visit, where you can just feel something heavy happen there, even if it's now peaceful and beautiful.
Precisely. It makes you consider the layers of time, the events that shape a place, and how those echoes influence how we experience it. Even centuries later, Bashis is incredibly skilled at capturing that feeling.
Now, from bustling cities to the serene world of temples, you send over posts about Matsuoka, Yoshizaki, Daishuji, and Komatsu. What I find fascinating is that Bash seemed drawn to these spiritual places. He wasn't just sightseeing. There's a sense of seeking something deeper.
To understand that, we need to talk about the role of Zen Buddhism in Japanese culture during this period. It was a major influence, emphasizing finding enlightenment in simple things, appreciating the impermanence of life, and connecting deeply with nature. So there's someone like Basho who's exploring these themes. Temples were natural havens. They were places where he could really delve into these ideas.
And he does it through haiku, right? Because I noticed a few that really caught my eye. At Tenriji Temple, he writes one about the sound of voices on a windy shore, almost interrupting the quiet. But then he blends those voices into the natural scene. It's like he's showing us how to hold that duality. that we can be seeking solitude but still connected to the world around us.
That's a really perceptive reading. And it gets to the heart of Bash's approach. He wasn't trying to escape the world. He was trying to find a deeper understanding of how he fit within it. How about we take a closer look at two specific temples where his haiku really illuminate this idea?
Sounds perfect. Which ones are you thinking of?
Let's focus on Yoshizaki and Natadera Temple. At Yoshizaki, one blog post highlights a haiku about a simple grass hut and the generations who have lived and passed on. It's a very visual haiku that connects the reader with the cyclical nature of life.
And when I read that, it made me pause and think about my own place in the grand scheme of things. Like all those people before me, living their lives, and then me, here, now, and then someday, gone. It's a bit heavy, but it's also oddly comforting.
That's the beauty of Bashu. He doesn't shy away from these big questions. He embraces the impermanence of life. There's another haiku at Yoshizaki about the dimming lights of the past. It's incredibly poignant and gets to the heart of what you were just saying. We're all part of this continuous flow of time, this dance between past, present, and future.
Okay, so we have Yoshizaki, which focuses on our connection to those who came before us. What about Natadera Temple?
At Natadera, Bosch writes about the moon reflected on a mountain edge. Now, you might think, okay, moon, mountain. Pretty standard nature imagery, right?
Mm.
But if we consider the structure of haiku, things get more interesting.
Oh, you're right. We haven't really talked about that. It's not just any poetry form.
Exactly. Haiku are these incredibly compact poems with a specific structure. Traditionally, they have 17 syllables divided into 3 lines, 5, 7, and 5. This forces the poet to be incredibly precise with their language. Every word carries weight. And often, there's this juxtaposition of images that create a deeper meaning.
So like the moon and the mountain aren't just random pretty things. They're working together to create a feeling, an idea.
Right. And in the case of the Natadera haiku, the moon reflecting on the sharp edge of the mountain could be seen as a reflection of Bosch himself. He's finding a moment of peace and stillness amidst his journey. It's a reminder that even when we're surrounded by the vastness of nature, there's this inner landscape that we carry with us.
So it's like those moments when you're out hiking and you reach a peak and you just have to stop and take it all in. You feel small, but also connected to something much larger.
Precisely. And for Bashi, these moments of connection with nature often lead to deeper insights about himself and the human condition.
All right, well, all this contemplation and temple hopping sounds exhausting. Good thing our last stop is Yamanaka Onsen. I have to admit, when I saw hot springs on the itinerary, I got a little excited. Even in 17th century Japan, it seems like people knew how to relax.
Well, even a wandering poet needs a break sometimes. But Yamanaka Onsen is more than just a tourist spot. Hot springs, or onsen as they're known in Japan, hold cultural significance. They're seen as places of healing, purification, and a way to connect with the natural world.
So Bashi's getting a spa day and a spiritual experience.
Nice. Exactly. And this idea of connecting with nature on a deeper level plays out in a haiku he writes at the onsen. He talks about the quiet steam rising from the hot springs. It's a very subtle image, but it perfectly captures the tranquil atmosphere and reflects Basho's own state of mind. He's finding a sense of peace amidst the journey. I love how you pointed out the quiet steam. It's such a specific detail, but it speaks volumes about the mood, the feeling of the place, and it makes me want to book a flight to Japan right now.
Huh. Perhaps we should add that to our itinerary for the next deep dive.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
Both literally and figuratively. We've seen how Basho elevates the travelogue into this profound reflection on the human condition. But I have to ask, how does all of this centuries-old poetry and journey, relate to us today? What are we supposed to take away from all of this? That's a great question. I think one of the most powerful messages we can take from O ku no Hoso Michi is this idea of mindfulness. Bosch is constantly encouraging us to pay attention to the details, to find meaning and beauty in the everyday. Like, remember that haiku about the cicada singing into a rock? It's a tiny moment, but he transforms it into something profound.
You know, it's funny. When I first started reading these blog posts, I was struck by the solitude in Bosch's journey. He's traveling alone, often reflecting on the past, contemplating the ephemeral nature of life. It almost felt a bit melancholy. But as we've been discussing his haiku, I'm realizing that solitude isn't necessarily negative. It can be a source of strength.
Absolutely. And Bosch's journey really highlights that. He's not afraid to be alone with his thoughts, to confront difficult emotions, to embrace the silence. In fact, it's often in those moments of solitude that he seems to connect most deeply with the world around him and with himself.
Like in that haiku about the moon reflecting on the mountain edge, he's finding peace and solace in the beauty of the natural world, even though he's alone. It's like that famous saying, wherever you go, there you are.
Exactly. Basho embodies that idea. He's not running away from anything. He's running towards himself, toward a deeper understanding of his place in the world and the journey itself, with all its challenges and moments of beauty, becomes the teacher.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Matsuo Basho's narrow road to the interior,
Yeah.
what stands out to you
Mhm.
as the most important takeaway for our listener?
We've touched on a lot of interesting points, but I think it's the idea that anyone can experience the same kind of profound self-discovery that Bosch did. It's not about physically walking the same path. It's about cultivating mindfulness in our everyday lives.
You know, it's funny. When I was reading the original source material you sent over,
Hmm.
I actually felt a bit intimidated. I thought,
Yeah.
okay, this Bash guy, he's a poet. He's traveling all over Japan, writing these amazing haikus. I could never do that. But the more we've been talking, the more I'm realizing that it's not about being a poet or traveling to exotic locations.
Right.
It's about shifting our perspective, paying attention to the world around us.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head.
Hmm.
Basho wasn't trying to be extraordinary. He is finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. We can do that too, right here, right now.
So it's not about grand gestures. It's about those little moments, like noticing the way the light filters through the leaves on a tree or appreciating the sound of rain on the roof, things we often take for granted.
Exactly. It's about slowing down,
Mm.
being present, and finding those tiny sparks of beauty and wonder that exist all around us.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be all serious contemplation either. Remember when we were talking about Yamanaka Onsen? Even Basho needed a spa day.
Okay, that's true. It's all about balance, right? Finding those moments of stillness, but also allowing ourselves to enjoy the simple pleasures of life. But going back to the idea that anyone can experience this kind of journey,
Yeah.
what's one specific thing our listener could do to start cultivating more mindfulness in their own life? Something practical, actionable.
I'd suggest something Bash himself did. Take a walk. But not just any walk. Leave your phone at home, or at least turn off the notifications. Choose a route, even if it's just around your neighborhood. And commit to really paying attention to what you see, hear, smell, feel. Notice the details you've never noticed before. Maybe it's the intricate pattern on a leaf, or the way the sunlight dances on the pavement. The key is to engage all of your senses and be fully present in that moment.
I love that. It's so simple, yet so powerful. And it's something anyone can do, no matter where they live or how busy their life is. It's like a mini pilgrimage, right in your own backyard. So to bring this all back to Oku no Hosomichi, why do you think this journey, this collection of prose and haiku, continues to resonate with people centuries later?
Because at its core, it's a story about the search for meaning and connection. Something we all crave as humans. Bosch just happens to express it beautifully through his observations of the natural world and his own inner landscape.
It's like he's giving us permission to embark on our own journeys, to find our own meaning, even if it looks different from his, and to find beauty and inspiration in the most unexpected places.
Exactly. His journey wasn't about reaching a destination. It's about the transformation that happened along the way. And that's something we can all relate to, whether we're physically traveling or navigating the ups and downs of everyday life.
So as we say goodbye to Bash and his narrow road to the interior, I hope our listener feels inspired to embark on their own journey of mindfulness, to see the world with fresh eyes, and to find those moments of wonder that make life so rich and meaningful. Until next time.
Happy travels, everyone.